Shalom, and welcome to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. This is a recording of a Rosh Hashanah sermon with Rabbi Adam Kligfield.
I had a dear teacher in rabbinical school who was a scholar, who was a bright man, who was a leader of ideas, who knew the tradition back and forth and taught us Talmud and Jewish law, and was raising a family, and he lived in Israel, and he had served in the army, and he was a full, mature, responsible adult in every way you could possibly imagine. And he never put on a seatbelt. He told me that he hated wearing a seatbelt. I said, this is a conversation you have with a 15-year-old. It's not a conversation you have with a grown-up. What do you mean you hate putting on a seatbelt? Seatbelts save lives, right? It's just obvious. There are very, very few car crashes where someone was wearing a seatbelt and didn't have a chance to survive as a result. Why would you ever take the risk of not putting it on? And how long does it take to put on a seatbelt, right? I mean, it takes 1/8 of a second and you're done. And he said to me, this is someone who teaches Jewish law and lived very punctiliously to the particulars of Jewish law, that he just hated the feeling of being hemmed in and being restricted and having the belt on him. I said, you'd rather risk your life than overcome your feeling of having a seatbelt across your chest as you're driving? He says, I don't really think of it that way, but yeah. It's a remarkable conversation. And at the time, I was really pushing the other side because I cared about him. I don't want to see him die in a car accident, obviously, in the same way that I yell at every member of the community that I see biking around the neighborhood without a helmet. And we have a few. And I wish I could issue a fatwa to enforce the helmet wearing, but I don't have that power so far. And I had a hard time understanding the concept that someone would be so allergic to a barrier that they'd be willing to make themselves more vulnerable as a result. And as I've thought about that interaction over the years, and the older I've gotten, and the more I've lived in the world, it's still the case that I will never get into a car without putting on a seatbelt. And I won't let anyone in a car in which I'm driving be in it without wearing a seatbelt. But I understand the psychology more. We don't like things strapping us down. We don't like limitations. We don't like rules that don't make sense. We don't like paying insurance bills and putting an investment into something that's very unlikely to happen. It doesn't feel good. Feels like we're wasting something. And the psychology of it is something that I identify with more, even though in that particular case, I can't imagine it ever being defensible. And I was thinking about the psychology of seatbelts when I was doing some study into some of the most commonly known Hebrew words in our liturgy. If you meet a Jewish 5-year-old and you ask him or her to name a couple of words from the tradition that they know by heart, they might say Shema. And if you prompt them with Oseh Shalom, they'll probably say, right. There may be more common ones, but not much more. It's one of the first things that you come across in your religious education or in your camp education, your home. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Echad, and Oseh Shalom b'Ramav, and all of us can sing many, many tunes to Oseh Shalom. And it's actually a lovely phrase for children to know early on, because Oseh Shalom b'Ramav is referring to a God who is Oseh, who makes, Shalom, peace, b'Ramav, in his heavens, in his high places. And we evoke that God all the time. We evoke that God when we confront way too much war in our society. We wish that God would come down and just make us all get along. And we invoke that God when things seem chaotic. And who wouldn't want to live in a world where God was imposing such a delicate, tender, sweet peace? I was asked to look into this phrase because the theme for our sisterhood throughout the year is the phrase Oseh Shalom, and I wanted to investigate where we got that phrase from. How did it get into the Siddur? How did it get to be the beginning of the last line of every full Kaddish that we say? And the more I learned about it, the more I realized that we are rather conveniently totally misquoting and misapplying the original intent of those three words. Similarly to how some in the Jewish community, well-intended, misuse, misremember, and misapply the concept of tikkun olam. The concept of tikkun olam is mostly used in the modern American Jewish idiom as a synonym for social action and social welfare and social reform, and there's nothing wrong with that, and Jews should be committed to that. It's not really what tikkun olam meant originally. The source of tikkun olam is in the Aleinu. We just said it, l'takein olam b'malchut Shaddai. That we are committed to completely fix the world under the sovereignty of God, which meant tikkun olam meant a religious revolution, not a social revolution. It meant bringing people closer to God, not people closer to equality. Nothing wrong with bringing people closer to equality. It's not what tikkun olam meant. At least not originally. Same thing with Oseh Shalom. It does not mean what we think it means, or it did not mean originally what we thought it meant. The original source for Oseh Shalom b'Romav, and I did not know this, if I had known it beforehand, I had forgotten it, is from one of the least well-known and least studied books of the Tanakh, and that is the book of Iyov, the book of Job. The wisdom literature about the man who suffered mercilessly, upon whose shoulders God kept heaping trauma and tragedy and loss to test his faith. And Job keeps finding a way to defend a God who was just raining yuck on top of him, as his friends start to try to convince him that maybe this God is not that into you. And at one point, Job says to his friends, God is a compassionate God. God is a gentle God. I'll just bring my case to the Holy One in the heavens, and I'm sure things will be well with me. And the response to what those friends say, to what Job says, is one of his friends saying the following phrase. The phrase ends with Oseh Shalom b'Romav. It doesn't begin there. It ends with Oseh Shalom b'Romav, and it begins with Hamshel v'fachad imo Oseh Shalom b'Romav, which means Hamshel, government, rules, structure, stricture. V'pachad, what does pachad mean? Fear, awe. Imo is with God. God is a God of rules, expectations, limitations, seatbelts, fear, awe, and trembling. Oseh Shalom b'Romav. That's how God makes peace in the heavens. God is not singing Kumbaya up there. God is forcing all of the celestial beings in this imagination to abide by certain immutable rules, to not jump from one circuit to the next, by laying out very clear expectations and commandments for the upper supernal beings and for us. That's how you achieve shalom. You don't achieve shalom in the heavens by God just letting everyone be exactly as they want to be and experience peace. You experience peace in structure. You experience peace when the environment is reliable. The very children who push against rules are the ones who need rules the most. Toddlers feel safe, even if they can't articulate it, in a structure that has been created in such a way that their risk is low and they can predict what's happening next with a little bit of hamshel and a certain amount of pachad, not the pachad that means terror, the pachad that means awe. That's how you experience shalom. Essentially, what I should have said back to my teacher back in 1997, 1998, when he was making the argument that he'd like to live in a seatbelt-free world, is learn your Job. Hamshel v'pachadimo. You need these anchors and these fetters and these bonds and these bindings in order to increase the chances that you're going to live your physical, emotional, and spiritual life with shalom. Would I invite you to think about this season, and in general, particularly this season? What are the limitations that you're beginning to resent in your life? The things you wish you could push past, the boundaries that feel too close in. What are the religious rules that you shy away from because they're a little bit too hard, a little too restrictive of your urges and your instincts? What are the relational structures that in the moment might make your world feel smaller, when in reality they're giving you a safe structure within which to live much more grandly and much more expansively? If you want to aim for shalom this year in your heart and in your neshama, and if we want to aim for more shalom in our society, we need to lean in to the way that God constructs reality. Embrace some of the hamshel. Bring in and embrace some of the pachad, of the awe. And if we do that a little bit more than last year, I have a suspicion that we're going to experience an increase in shalom and match the shalom in the heavens with the shalom we help create down here in this realm. I wish us all strength and open-heartedness as we go on all the journeys that we intend to go on this year. And I wish you all a Shana Tova.
You've been listening to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. If you enjoy these podcasts, we invite you to write a review on the Apple Podcast website or wherever you get your podcasts. For more information on Temple Beth Am, Los Angeles, please visit www.tbala.org.